welcome to the Fantasy Fangirls Podcast, where two sisters dive deep into beloved fantasy lore, characters, themes, series, and more.
I'm Lexi.
And I'm Nicole.
And today we're covering chapters 9 through 14 of A Court of Wings and Ruin by Sarah J. Maas. But before we dive in, let's cover our bases with the usual content warnings. While we're focusing today's discussion on chapters 9 through 14 and ACOWAR, we are going to bring in themes, foreshadowing lore, and other insights across the entire ACOTAR series. These deep dives do not, however, have spoilers for the rest of Sarah J. Maas's series, except at the end of every episode, where we include our Maasverse Madness segment. We'll give a big spoiler warning so you can leave the episode if you haven't read the Maasverse, or you can keep listening for Throne of Glass and /or Crescent City callouts.
So with all of that said, if you don't know that we're going on a tour of Prithian today, then please do go finish the series. We will be here when you're done.
Next up, we at Fantasy Fangirls are adults who say adult things about adult books. In other words, friends, this podcast is rated R.
Episode 2, and we're already at our first sex scene. So if you know Fantasy Fangirls, you know you need to be mindful of those little listening ears. However, in all seriousness though, this episode we do discuss sexual assault, so please listen at your comfort level.
Additionally, we are so excited for the Dragon Gauntlet in Boyne City, Michigan this August 16th and 17th. We're doing a live show on the 16th, like literally right on the waterfront. We're so excited. We're going to be doing dragon trivia for the epic mountainside scavenger hunt the next morning. And then we can't wait to dance the night away with you at the evening bookish themed ball.
Learn more about the Dragon Gauntlet and get your last minute tickets at the link in our show notes. And Patreon members, check out your portal for a discount code.
Speaking of which, if you love Fantasy Fangirls and are so excited for this ACOWAR journey we're on together, if you want more content, more community, more events, and more, please check out our Patreon.
We have 2 membership tiers that you can join. The Valkyries for $5 a month, which includes access to our Boppin' Discord, live Q&As from Lexi and I, community events, and book club, like this month's book club, which is Assistant to the Villain, which has author Hannah Mayer joining us. We also have promo codes for live events, plus a 20% off discounted merch store. That is all for $5 a month. Or you can join the High Fae, which includes everything from the Valkyrie level, plus early access to ad-free episodes, our full episode outlines, and special voting privileges. That is for $10 a month.
Join the party at patreon.com/fantasyfangirls. The link is also in our show notes. And really and truly, thank you so much for supporting us as we've turned this podcast into our livelihood. It's literally all because of you.
And now it is time to leave the spring court again!
Huzzah! As always, Nicole is going to kick off this ACOWAR deep dive episode with a summary of what happens in chapters 9 through 14. So gather round, friends. We need an Inner Circle Debrief.
Chapter 9. In the aftermath of the whipping, Fae-vorite notices the guards definitely start to show where their allegiances lie. Spoiler, it's not with Tamlin anymore. And Lisa from marketing, aka Alice, is the first to jump ship, telling Fae-vorite that she's yeeting out of here to the summer court. And Fae-vorite tells her that she will always have a place to stay in her court, aka the night court. Goodbye, Lisa, we will miss you. Time to go hole hunting. And this round, everybody's invited. After almost murdering Ianthe in her sleep, Fae-vorite gets the full download from the Lannister twins on the Highburn army. TLDR, they're fucked. And with that information, Fae-vorite's got enough to get the heck out of there. Bag of supplies packed and her plan is in order, but just as she's about to start cranking up the road trip tunes, she overhears Lucien telling Ianthe to back the fuck off. Stepping into the clearing, she sees that Ianthe has Lucien backed into a corner with Faebane shackles along his wrist. Just when I thought I couldn't hate this girl anymore. Fae-vorite uses her Daemati powers to infiltrate Ianthe's head and make her smash a rock on her hand over and over again, all the while giving her a command that she will never touch another person against their will. Lucien's like, damn! But 2 others walk into the clearing. It's Branna and Dagden. Chapter 10. Turns out they've also been blasting Taylor Swift's mastermind. All that food the spring court's been eating, yep, laced with Faebane. And the apple Fae-vorite just ate, created specifically in Highburn using Faebane fertilizer. As Fae-vorite's powers slowly start to leave her, she battles the twins. After a fun Fae-vorite fire show surrounding Branna, Lucien stabs Branna, killing her. And Fae-vorite stabs Dagden through the skull. You will not be missed, Lannister twins! happens? Lucian tells Feyre that he is coming with her, and both of them, with their magic gone, they leave through the super convenient portal to the Autumn Court, just as they hear a man-bear pig roar in the distance. Part 2, Cursebreaker. Chapter 11. After a night of awkward confrontations in the Autumn Court cave, it's a silent montage. 5 days of hiking in complete quiet, we learn that this court is not for the faint of heart. Eventually, Lucian opens up about his past with 6 older bloodthirsty brothers and Lucian's old lover Jasminda, who was brutally murdered by his family. One night, Feyre wakes up to a hand gripping her face. It's the Jonas Brothers knockoffs, the Autumn Brothers. They have found them. Chapter 12. Feyre feels her powers slowly start to come back, and using her fire magic, she attacks the cave, causing a cave-in. Giving her and Lucian the opportunity to run away. Unfortunately, leaving all their supplies behind. They run and finally find another cave to rest in, and hopefully not freeze to death. Huddling for warmth, Lucian asks about his mate Elaine, and Feyre tells him that she loves gardening and she's engaged to a human lord's son. Lucian asks about her past with Rhys, but Feyre refuses to answer. The next day, they pass into the Winter Court, aka my personal hell, and they make their way over an iced covered lake. But oh no, it looks like the Autumn Bros are a sucker for you, Feyre and Lucian. They begin to melt the ice. Chapter 13. Not wanting to participate in this polar plunge, Feyre and Lucian run for their lives. The Autumn Bros appear right in front of them, and Feyre is shot with an arrow. Things are not looking so good as Eris pulls a Nick Jonas and breaks away from the Bros, dragging Feyre with him. But what's that? It's a bird! It's a plane! No, it's an Illyrian warrior dropping out of the sky like a damned meteor. Cassian and Azriel come in with 500 years worth of vengeance for Eris. And Feyre, seeing that they're about to very well commit Autumn Bro murder, tells them to stop. But that's not all. Feyre reveals that she is bad bitch high lady of the Night Court. And Lucian's like, come again? Cassian and Azriel take Lucian and Feyre to the middle where they meet up with Mor, and they all winnow to Valaris. Chapter 14. Man, there's no place like home. Lucian is prepared for screaming, wailing, people being tortured on the walls, Claire Better style. But no, there's children laughing in the streets. What is this place? Amren appears to tell him that this is Valaris, making a dramatic entrance because truly, what else do you expect? Rhys announces himself, and Feyre drops to her knees in disbelief that she is finally back with her mate. Rhys scoops her up and tells everyone to get the fuck out so they can have a moment alone. Taking her upstairs, these two catch up on the absolute havoc that has become the Spring Court, and after a bubble bath, home bang, homity bang. I said a homity bang.
Feyre may be back in the Night Court, which means she's back with her temperature regulating sheets. Whew, thank goodness. Does anyone else have the age-old battle with their partner of whether to have the fan on or off at night? Because Jake says the fan makes his nose stuffy, but I just get so hot without it. If you wake up too hot or too cold, let us introduce you to Miracle Made bed sheets. Miracle Made sheets are inspired by NASA and use silver-infused fabrics that are temperature regulating so you can sleep at the perfect temperature all night long.
These sheets are infused with silver that prevent up to 99.7% of bacterial growth, leaving them to stay cleaner and fresher 3 times longer than other sheets. No more gross odors. And Miracle sheets are luxuriously comfortable without the high price tag of other luxury brands, and they feel just as nice, if not nicer, than some sheets used at 5-star hotels.
Go to trymiracle.com/FF to try Miracle Made sheets today. And whether you're buying them for yourself or as a gift for a loved one, if you order today, you can save over 40%. And if you use our code FF at checkout, you'll get 3 free towels and save an extra 20%. Miracle is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you aren't 100% satisfied, you'll get a full refund.
Upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made. Go to trymiracle.com/FF and use the code FF to claim your free 3-piece towel set and save over 40% off. Again, that is trymiracle.com/FF to treat yourself. Thank you so much, Miracle Made, for sponsoring this episode.
It's time to step into the cauldron and discuss key insights, character analysis, foreshadowing, theories, and oh, so much more. And don't worry, friends, we're almost out of the Spring Court. Today's episode picks up right where we left off after the Sentry is wrongly punished by Tamlin with 21 lashings. While Ianthe ushered the Hybern party and Tamlin back into the manor for lunch, Feyre stays in the barracks and tends to the wounded Sentry's injuries. She may be purposely exaggerating this difference between herself and the High Lord of the Spring Court, to make him look even worse, But in instances like this, she really doesn't have to do a whole lot of, I'll say, maneuvering here. Tending to the wounded innocent is something she would do anyway. And it speaks volumes that the rest of the nobility party here just continue on with their day to have lunch, cementing the impression to the sentries that Tamlin is unbothered and doesn't care about them.
And this is, like you're saying, so much in alignment with the Feyre we've fallen in love with. Is she doing this calculated? Yeah, sure. But spy or no, this is something she would have naturally gone forward to help the Sentry. Might I remind you of the lost member of the Blue Man group back in book 1, where she defied Tamlin's orders and Lucian's orders and stayed with him. I'm honestly more surprised that Timmy Tam didn't try to fight with her to be like, come with us to lunch, let's go. You know, with all of his like unified front bullshit.
That's a really good point. Tamlin may think that, you know, because they're a team and she's supposed to be an extension of him, that her staying back is helping his image because it's like an extension of him staying back to care for them. I don't think that's right at all.
I don't think he's thinking that, but logically that would make sense. However, I hope he realizes how bad it makes him look. Maybe he does want to stay back and help the Sentry, but he also knows he has to stay with Ianthe for, you know, the Hybern and staying in good graces.
Yeah.
And whatnot. So maybe he's like, oh, thank God someone's going back over to
exactly.
the Sentry. Yeah,
that's
like,
kind of what I was thinking there.
But I don't think Tamlin's that smart.
It's situations like this, you know, consequences of the Spring Court falling aside, I love how Feyre is simply moving the existing pieces on the chessboard. I'm giving her this credit now because pretty soon I do think she goes overboard planting lies and mines to make Tamlin out to be even worse than he is. From what we see on these pages, those future actions, they just don't feel necessary and they're driven by her own hatred for Tamlin. Because here, the Sentries are apologizing to her that, quote, they hadn't stopped any of it. But geez, Feyre, there you go and be super cocky again by thinking, quote, if I had asked them, they would have handed me their own knives to slit their throats. Oh my goodness, that really took a quick turn. This thought makes me realize that as much as I was just talking about innocent Sentries, she hasn't actually forgiven them because they stood by after Under the Mountain and did nothing while she wasted away.
When you put it like that, I'm like, you know what, that's really fair. And she went through some high trauma. She doesn't have to forgive them. They literally left her to rot. But it was a very big, like, whoa, that's a 180.
I think they're trying. I mean, you could say the same thing about Lucian here. They're trying.
Lucian at least tried to help her under the mountain. Broad and Hart, I don't even think we got a sentence about them under the mountain. That's how in the background they were.
With the whole crew, which now includes Ianthe and Tamlin, planning to go to the wall to inspect the third hole the next day, Feyre packs her bags and Alice says her goodbyes. Feyre loses her earlier pretense of innocence and they share such a sweet moment. Alice assures her that she will always have one friend in the summer court. And, quote, you will always have one in mind, Feyre replies. She knew which court I meant and did not look afraid.
It makes so much sense why Alice is going to the summer court. It's where she's from. It's where their family is. But man, can you imagine imagine Alice in the night court? I wish so badly we had this alternate universe where she went to the night court instead. God damn.
Alice gives her a pack with supplies for more than just this trip to the wall, understanding without needing to say it that she knows Feyre is leaving soon. Feyre has even ensured the guards to the autumn court door aren't there, so she has an escape route. Later, as Feyre is sneaking away, she'll think, quote, I had primed everything to fall. I'd long since stopped feeling any sort of guilt or doubt about my plan. Not with Alice now safely away. She may theoretically care about the people of the Spring Court, but the only person she truly wants to keep safe is Alice. Alice has proved herself through this entire series so far to be smart and observant. She sees the writing on the wall and knows it is time to get out of the Spring Court before it collapses. Alice has been there for Feyre in a way no one else in the Spring Court has. You know, we joke about her being the onboarder, Lisa from marketing, but really she has been the most honest and direct with Feyre in the Spring Court since the beginning, which is something that has always desperately lacked here. Goodbye, Alice. We will miss you in our story and hope you live a long and happy life with your nephews in the summer court and you are safe from the Hybern attacks.
You know, when you're like at a corporate job or you're at or any job, honestly, and you have like a work BFF and then they leave and it's like the most heart-wrenching thing. But they're always like, if you want to come to my company, like I'll always put in a really good rec for you. Like that is what's happening here. This is Lisa from marketing and I love her for it. I do have a question for you. Do you think we're ever going to see Alice in a future ACOWAR book?
No.
I don't think so either, which makes me so sad. It is time for our third and final trip to the wall in the spring court. The whole crew sets out for the wall the next day, but instead of sharing a tent with Tamlin, Fae-vorite insists on sharing with Ianthe, using the excuse of wanting to mend the bad blood after the whipping, after the summer solstice. The list goes on and on. But she's mostly doing it so that she can spare Lucien from having to be Ianthe's center of attention. And I'm just going to point out, good for Feyre for finally thinking of Lucien's comfort level here. I'm just going to say, I also, in my own headcanon, believe that Tamlin was so certain. He was like, I'm going to get lucky tonight. We're going to have tent sex. It's going to be great. And Feyre sleeping with Ianthe, like going into another tent, is such a slap in the face to him, which is just delicious. In Feyre and Ianthe's tent, however, Feyre is clutching a dagger as Ianthe sleeps and is basically trying to talk herself out of committing straight up murder for this high priestess. But she tells herself, no, Feyre, quote, my goal was bigger than revenge, my purpose greater than personal retribution. However, several hours later, she finds that knife in her palm and sitting up, she's over the high priestess about to go,
I did not get that impression at all. I think she was absolutely contemplating it, like, yes. Yeah. And thinking about giving into the urge, especially as she reasons why in her head, about not being able to stomach the idea of letting these people get away with what they've done. But she's still holding herself back. So I just see her like holding the knife.
No,
like that's it.
In her inner monologue, she says she grabs the knife and she sits up and she's literally sitting over Ianthe.
Well, of course, she's holding a knife. I absolutely agree with that. But there is a huge difference between her sitting and holding a knife versus her sitting over Ianthe, literally about to kill her. Huge difference.
I am still in the she's about to kill her camp because I think that's just delicious. And honestly, I wish she had done it because of what happens later.
So does she.
Feyre does not get her revenge, though, because Ianthe does open her eyes and go straight to the knife. Feyre says, quote, you can't be too careful while sharing a camp with your enemies. In fact, Ianthe, looking terrified, says, Hybern is not our enemy. Ianthe, she literally is holding a knife looking at you like she's about to kill you, girl. Whether she's standing over her or not standing, whether she's like looming over her or not, like that's sus. She's not talking about Hybern right now.
About the line with Feyre saying, my goal was bigger than revenge, my purpose greater than personal retribution. I definitely laughed at this line because, like we talked about so much last episode, Feyre is an unreliable narrator. Yes, she has a bigger goal of being a spy and collecting vital information to help aid in the war against Hybern and the Spring Court. But her personal retribution puts blinders on her, especially in regard to the Hybern twins, as we will soon find out.
Definitely. Feyre walks out of the tent and she gives Ianthe a quick smile. Need for revenge or not, unreliable narrator or not, this shit is so funny. Her about to murder Ianthe, whether that's just by weighing a dagger in her hand or about to like psycho this scene. I love this moment with Feyre. I think that is spy Feyre that I'm so here for.
We get to Feyre's first real conversation with the Hybern twins, and it's interesting that even she recognizes that her presence is, quote, now deemed relatively unthreatening, if not a nuisance. She thinks it's because they have settled into a tolerance of each other after playing their little games. But I think the main reason the Hybern twins think she's unthreatening now is because they know that her powers are dwindling.
100%. Absolutely.
But, just to be on the safe side, they pull an evil queen from Snow White and have an apple for Feyre to eat, which I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt and believe she grabs this from the Spring Court food stash brought on this camping trip, and the apple was not just literally handed over to her directly by the Hybern twins. But may I also say, during the scene and all the blatant mentions of the apple, I can't help but cringe every time I see it on the page, partly because it does feel a little bit in your face. When has eating ever been described in such detail?
Wow, we're just disagreeing left and right today.
Right?
I actually was craving an apple after this. I was reading the scene and I was like, I will walk to my local grocery store right now to get an apple.
But while Fae-vorite unknowingly turns into Snow White, let's turn our attention back to the very interesting conversation with the Hybern twins, because we get a good mini download here. They're deciding which hole is better for the cauldron to study the work already done by the powerful person or object who caused the hole by passing through the wall. And then the cauldron will magnify how this hole was made until the wall collapses entirely. Amren will later explain this as using complex spell work to help the cauldron exploit the existing hole in the wall to break it entirely. My understanding is that there's strategy in choosing which hole, because the cauldron needs to be near that hole when it takes down the wall, and the Hybern army will be with the cauldron since the King of Hybern won't let it out of his sight. So it's not about which hole is best for the cauldron to use, but which hole is best for Hybern's armies to be at when the wall comes down. I think that's right. Dagden says that the first hole they encountered is best because it's closest to the western coast and therefore easier access for Hybern's forces to get to in the first place, since of course they're coming from the west. Plus, it's closest to the Spring Court Manor, so they'd have more access to Tamlin's supplies. But Branna thinks that this third hole, the one most east, is better because it's closer to the continent, so they can swiftly take over this island of Prythian in the Mortal Realm before heading to the continent. The twins will confirm that they plan for Hybern to take over Prythian before uniting with their armies on the continent for that invasion. Fae-vorite agrees with her because she points out that the other courts won't have time to come together and intercept Hybern before crossing the strait as they go to invade the continent. I have to wonder if Fae-vorite is trying to mislead her or is going with, like reverse psychology, or just truly actually believes this and is having a conversation like that.
I definitely don't think it's door number 3. I would go probably into the reverse psychology. The way I read it is like, I think that this one is best. Yeah, go with this one, guys. Like, that's the tone I read that in Fae-vorite.
Which would automatically make them be like, oh no, this is the worst one then. And she wants it to be this hole actually that they go through, because then they could do that interception.
Exactly.
Well, they don't listen to her at least. So even though they both die, but yeah. I know we keep bringing up Fae-vorite's cockiness in these Spring Court episodes, but here it is again, quote, proud, arrogant, cruel. I'd been taking their measure this fortnight. Fae-vorite thinks this as she's eating this poisoned apple, already feeling the effects of her diminishing magic from weeks of Faebane in the food. She is wrong in her assumption of why they're so interested in these holes in the wall, and will soon learn that they most certainly have been watching her more closely than she realizes. So sure, she can say that she's been taking their measure this fortnight, but how much so? Like, it's only so much that she has been when she thinks that she has all the puzzle pieces.
Yeah.
Fae-vorite does do something very clever here, though. She puts a number to Hybern's army, saying like it's fact that they've got 10,000 soldiers. I'm assuming that she came up with this number out of the blue and not from, say, Tamlin, to see what Branna's response is and if she corrects her. And being as smug as they are, Branna falls into her trap to get more information about their army. It's actually 100,000, okay? Oh, and twice that number when you add their allies on the continent, which, quick pause, I said the total army was 300,000 in our ACOWAR episode 10, Suriel Teatime, and I apologize. I misread thinking the allies had twice 100,000 and then combined it is 300,000, but it's actually 200,000 combined between the allies and Hybern. I apologize about that. I hate when I get things wrong, and I always do my best to correct.
You're a human being, and we're allowed to be imperfect. All of us are, even you listeners. When Fae-vorite says 200,000, mother save us all, I literally wrote in my notes, and they're fucked. Because with a whole Prythian, they could battle an army of 200,000. It'd be hard, don't get me wrong, but it would be less of a absolutely wipe them off the face of the earth. However, this is a Prythian after Amarantha's rule. Later in the High Lords meeting, Kallias will say that they don't have enough armies because Amarantha did her job very well. And I know he's not the only High Lord thinking that. Look at Tamlin. This is not only a Prythian against Hybern, this is an already heavily weakened Prythian against a very strong Hybern. So yes, they are fucked.
Well, and let's talk about that with Amarantha. We also glean insight into why Hybern didn't strike while Amarantha reigned over Prythian, which is a fair question. For one, the king hadn't found the cauldron yet, and he wanted to have it to ensure his victory. Plus, he considered Amarantha an experiment for how they might break the people of Prythian. And her rule was good motivation for their allies on the continent, knowing what would await them. I assume that this knowing what would await them means, number one, it is proof that Prythian is pretty easy to take over. And number two, it offers a glimpse into what a remade world can look like for those against Prythian. All of this to say, Hybern let Amarantha do her rogue thing because remember, he was not part of this plan that she had because it was someone else doing his dirty work of experimenting with and, like you were saying, Nicole, weakening Prythian. I think the Hybern twins even bothered to share this information with Thera because they knew she was planning to escape and they knew she wouldn't successfully be able to without her magic. They set a trap to make her show her true intentions by feeding her this information. And they volunteered this truthful information because they knew she wasn't going to survive to tell anyone about it outside the spring court.
Egg on their face. So with all this information, Fae-vorite decides that she's ready to yeet on out of here and head back home. This is while Tamlin and Jurian are off hunting. A quick pause. I love that the High Lord of the Spring Court is off hunting rather than at the wall with Branna and Dagden getting plans about the wall with Hybern. Fae-vorite was the hunter. Let's not forget that. He is a High Lord. He should know what the Hybern royals are doing. That is wild to me that he's just off hunting. Anyway, Fae-vorite sent the sentries off to fetch water, claiming that her bruises still ache. This is again playing on that anger that they have with Tamlin and their wish to help her instead of him. And the Hybern royals are still at the wall. So now is as best a time as any to get on out of here while people are scattered throughout the woods. So Fae-vorite grabs the pack with Alice's supplies and is ready to leave. Fae-vorite came here with 2 goals, and she has now completed both. Number 1, gather information on Hybern's forces to bring back to the Night Court. She has the numbers, their plans, specific locations, names of their foreign allies. I mean, she hit the jackpot with this conversation with Branna and Dagden. And her second goal is bring down the Spring Court from the inside out. The people have lost faith in their almighty high priestess from her stunt at the summer solstice. The sentries are now showing signs of rebelling and defying their high lord from the steady explosion and the whipping. And the Hybern royals are also now doubting the strength of their Spring Court alliance. I would gather that they never really had a lot of faith in him, but their faith is gone. But that's not all. Fae-vorite figures that in about 1 to 2 days, a sentry will reveal the fake news that she planted in his mind, which is an alibi. Her alibi that she planted in his mind is Fae-vorite fled for her life after being nearly killed by Branna and Dagden. Okay, not super off the mark right now. She planted images of her brutalized body, which are carefully chosen based off of Branna and Dagden's mutilation style. This sentry also helped her escape, again, according to her fake alibi, and would describe in detail how Ianthe and Tamlin refused to intervene in her torture because they didn't want to risk their alliance with Hybern. And when the sentry finally shares what happened to their curse breaker, their newly anointed Cauldron blessed, quote, there would be no sentry or denizen of this court who would stand with Tamlin or Ianthe after this, after me. I have a very different line of thinking with you, Lexi. So I know you're going to go off on Fae-vorite in a moment for this. Personally, I think that this is kind of brilliant. I'm not going to lie. Now, don't get me wrong. It is extremely risky, especially for this sentry. After the last sentry who was framed for Ianthe's, chess maneuvering, who knows what would happen to this one once this rumor gets out, and let alone what Tamlin would do to make sure that this rumor doesn't spread further. But this, I will say, this is a surefire way to get people out of the Spring Court. A, leaving Tamlin looking like a fool with no people to support him. And B, who knows what would have happened to them if they were there when the wall came down. They felt it all the way in the Dawn Court, that reverberation of magic. So she might have also just saved a lot of lives by getting them out of the Spring Court, even if it's in a very manipulative way.
Okay, I will say I never thought of it this way, because I feel like this is her putting the nail in the coffin for Tamlin to make sure, quote, letting his court collapse around him is a better punishment, certainly longer than an easy death.
I think that too.
So I feel like if her goal was to get the Spring Court citizens out of the territory and to safety, like you're saying here, she would have used her mind control to directly plant that seed versus putting all of her efforts on making them hate Tamlin. And I just got to bring this up. You complained about Tamlin not helping evacuate his people to the east last episode. But she's basically showing the same lack of care to get these people who might not be able to evacuate on your own, as you pointed out of the Spring Court. I'm not saying I would have an answer on how she would do this. I'm just playing the devil's advocate here.
Is their High Lord. She's not fucking responsible for them. She has her own people to worry about.
That's not what she's been making all of them to believe. They are relying on her. I think this has nothing to do with the people of the Spring Court, and this is entirely to just fuck more with Tamlin, and she has already done enough fuckery with him and proven her point, and this was more of her being like, I hate him so much, and I need to make sure that everyone else really does, when it was already happening. And now she only had a bigger wedge for his people to drive into him. And so later on, again, she doesn't know this, but later on, when they do need the Spring Court, she fucked up so badly with this final nail in the coffin that there is no coming back.
All right.
I have very heated feelings about this part of the book.
You make a lot of points. Yeah, that's fair. And I also, going back on what I just said, because I'm playing my own devil's advocate now, I think that if she was doing this from a let me protect people, her inner monologue would have said that, because she's also on such a high and mighty high horse that she would have been like, good job, me.
Yes. Like, I'm thinking I'm getting this people of the Spring Court out of here because Tamlin has made it unsafe, when instead all she wants to do is have them just hate him. And it's a good consequence that they all leave, but probably to some safety and whatnot, but hopefully. We don't know what their circumstances are. There are a lot of people in poverty, and she says she cares about protecting these people and their innocence and, all of that. And yet then she creates this implosion, and Hybern just comes in and takes over, and she's totally okay. Like, that was her plan. And that is totally contradictory to these people staying safe.
Fine, big sister, you win this one. So with her domino effect in place, home. I was going home. Thank God. Get us out of the Spring Court. Like, we like each other normally. Like, we need to get out of the Spring Court. I remember reading this for the first time and being quite surprised, because I thought she was going to stay in the Spring Court a lot longer. We're in chapter 10, and she's getting out of there. But I'm not mad about it. Don't get me wrong. I'm not mad.
Me too. I'm very relieved about it. This stretch in the Spring Court brings up a lot of conflicting feelings about Feyre, as Nicole and I have clearly shown when we've obviously explored it at length, especially last episode. Some people cheer her on and feel she is absolutely 100% in the right, and Tamlin and the Spring Court had this coming, full stop. Some people feel that she wasn't as much of a mastermind as she thinks she is, because the court is ripe for falling anyway because of Tamlin and Ianthe's actions. Some people are put off by Feyre and her cruelty and cockiness, and they don't like her a lot after this. And a lot of other people, like me, and I'm not wanting to speak for you here, but I think like you as well, feel a little bit of all of these feelings. Yep. We're not even completely out of here yet, but it is so much conflicting emotions, and it's just been such a roller coaster ride. And I'm just so glad to get out of here, because then we do get into more of that familiarity where it's like, when you see somebody who you know so well, and it's like, why are they acting this way? And then they go back to, I'll say, like, their natural habitat, and it's like, oh, okay, this is who you really are, sort of
totally.
Thing.
A noise pulls Feyre back from yeeting straight on out of the Spring Court, and that noise is back off, and a low female laugh.
And Feyre seriously considers to keep going because they're distracted, quote, horrible as it was. She doesn't feel guilty or doubtful about her plan now that Alice has gone to safety. So without outright saying it, she's okay abandoning Lucien in the chaos she's leaving behind. He'll even ask her about it later, and she doesn't respond because, she was okay with that. Lucien took a lot of L's last book, and I'll even argue in ACOWAR as well. She has felt betrayed by her friend, but she also hasn't let him in as he tries to fix his mistakes since she returned to the Spring Court, which again, we talked a lot about last episode. She thought to herself that she's not capable of forgiving someone who has hurt her loved ones. And Lucien does kind of fall under this for his role with Hybern and her sisters. But she's also conflicted because he has been her friend, a loved one. So her hatred for Ianthe ultimately wins over her, for lack of a better word, indifference. But in her heart, she's not really indifferent to Lucien. She has had to consciously remind herself to hate him and not care about him. So in this moment, Feyre logically tells herself to leave him, but she knows deep down that he doesn't deserve this with Ianthe, especially because she's the one who stirred up Ianthe's jealousy with Lucien.
Oh, I'm going to try to talk about this scene without just screaming bloody murder into the microphone. Feyre sees Ianthe pressing in on Lucien, telling him that they had fun on Calamai, and why hasn't he sought her out? And Lucien reminding her that he is a mated male, because no, that does not seem to click for Ianthe. And then Ianthe brings in the, quote, well, you don't act that way with Feyre. You put your hands all over her. Feyre realizes that her evil plan with Lucien, the one where she sexualized him and provoked Tamlin's jealousy, turns out it provoked Ianthe's jealousy as well. Again, this is Feyre not thinking about the consequences of her actions. With a, quote, do not touch me from Lucien, Feyre moves into the clearing and sees the full scene. Lucien is backed against a tree with Faebane shackles around his wrists, making him unable to move and unable to use his powers. And then she slides her hand over his chest. I do not have words for how much I loathe this woman. What absolutely kills me is that Lucien looks at Feyre and, quote, fear and humiliation reddened his golden skin. Humiliation is truly just what breaks my heart here. He is literally being sexually assaulted. His shirt is askew. The top of his pants are undone. He's chained to a fucking tree. And he is feeling humiliation at what's occurring. And what kills me is that this is not an uncommon response for people who are sexually assaulted. People often feel like they should have done something different, that there's something wrong with them, that it's their fault in some way. And Lucien also might be feeling this way because his mate's sister is seeing him in this state, and he's afraid that she will blame him or tell Elaine of what's occurring. But Ianthe just looks over her shoulder at Feyre and smiles and slides her hand down Lucien's chest and says, we'll return to the camp when we're done. I'm so glad she dies. I want this woman burned at the stake. I'm so mad at her. Good God.
To say Ianthe underestimates Feyre is an understatement. She may know she's been playing power games with Feyre, but she thinks she's winning the game because Tamlin has sided with her. So Ianthe has a certain disgusting cockiness here, quote, to simply throw in my face that she could. Daring to instruct Feyre to do nothing while she does this to Lucien right in front of her because Ianthe thinks she's proven that she has the upper hand over Feyre. Luckily, Feyre is having none of that. She goes into Ianthe's mind, and I just love the description of, quote, a mask over a face of decay to describe how horrible her thoughts are. And Feyre mind controls her to take her hands off Lucien, unshackle him, and pick up a rock and smash her hand until Feyre tells her to stop. Huzzah!
Yes!
It's a satisfying callback to the memory Rhys had showed her when he broke Ianthe's hand with his power when she tried to touch him. And he had said to her then, quote, your hand will heal. The next time you touch me or anyone in my lands, you will find that the rest of you will not fare so well. As Ianthe smashes her hand to bloody bits with a rock, Feyre speaks to her, making her mind believe it, that she will never again touch another person against their will, that she will not remember what happened here. She can see a healer, but not erase the scarring. So she will always remember that if she touches someone against their will, everything she is will cease to exist. And Ianthe will live with this terror every single day, but never know where it originates.
Quote, only the fear of something chasing you, haunting you, waiting for you the instant you let your guard down. Oh, Feyre, damn. Yes, I love this Feyre.
Yes, I was just going to say, this is the revenge Feyre I love so much. Sticking up for what is right, going after the bad guy where it technically only impacts the bad guy. May Ianthe never know a moment of peace again in life. I'll give another huzzah. Of course, later when she and Feyre meet up again, she'll say how it took the King of Hybern days to unravel Feyre's mind spell here. And she still won't be able to use most of her hand. I just can't wait to give an extra big huzzah when she she dies. We'll give such a big cheer for that. But alas, we aren't there yet. In this scene, Lucien is staring at Feyre like he's never seen her before. Which, yeah, big surprise, Lucien. She's a Daemati. When Branna approaches and says that the word he's looking for is Daemati, first of all, Lucien should know what a Daemati is. I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt and thinking, of course he knows that, but he's only shocked that Feyre herself is one, and Branna made a wrong assumption.
God, I hope you're right. As Feyre is preparing to leave the spring court, she needs to make sure she has her supplies, and that better include her thinking about her hydration. Look, when we're all running around checking things off our to-do list, it's sometimes one of the last things we think of, but it is so important to stay hydrated, especially in these summer months. However, hydration is not just about drinking water. It is about water and electrolytes.
The solution obviously isn't to stop drinking water, though. It's to drink water plus electrolytes. Enter Element. Element is an electrolyte solution that has enough sodium, potassium, and magnesium to get you feeling and performing your best. Plus, in fact, I have my Element right here. My favorite part is that it has zero sugar, artificial flavors, or any other dodgy ingredients to hold you back.
My favorite part is that Element has so many flavors, just all the flavors. I love going through my variety pack, trying new ones. Lately, I've been going back actually to one of my original favorite flavors, which is the mango chili. It feels like I'm getting a treat whenever I am having my daily Element, except this tasty treat is good for me and my hydration. That makes me feel even extra happy.
Element came up with a fantastic offer for us. Get your free sample pack with any Element purchase at drinklmnt.com/FFG. Be sure to try the new Element Sparkling, which is a bold 16-ounce can of sparkling electrolyte water. It's perfect for on the go this summer. Let's get back to the very important fact that Branna and Dagden are here. Because this is bad, folks. Real bad. They're flanking Feyre like she's prey and they're taunting her. Based on their evil villain monologue, we can bet that they're not letting Lucien leave alive or with his mind intact. I'm willing to bet the same goes for Feyre as they bide their time until the Faebane from the apple takes effect and she can't shield from them.
That's interesting. I think that they would have left Feyre because of Tamlin's deal with Hybern and her being such a big part of that, her being too useful with the time that she spent in the night court. But honestly, even I could see them leaving her as like, oh, she's an exciting playmate. She'll keep things interesting for us at least.
Oh, I like that idea. I guess I was thinking, I agree with you that they do need her alive, but they want to infiltrate her mind so that she's under their control. And right now they can't do that because she has her powers and she's shielding. So as soon as she no longer has her powers, then that's where they can mentally attack her and bend her to their will.
That's a great point. Yes.
Here is where we learn what Nicole and I have been saying and just shouting into the mic these episodes, that Feyre is so focused on her own plotting and maneuvering that she didn't notice that these twins have done the same thing. They've intended to take the spring court. Note that this is not so much an alliance with Tamlin as it is a takeover of his territory. Ianthe has been willingly, emphasis on willingly, that even surprised them, helping them by sprinkling Faebane powder into everyone's food. Uh-oh, this is why Feyre's magic hasn't seemed right and why they're all getting headaches.
From earlier, quote, winnowing felt like wading through mud. In fact, my powers had become more of a burden than a help. I had a throbbing headache by noon and spent the last leg of the journey dizzy and disoriented as we all winnowed again and again. Feyre is smart. She is a hunter. She spent the majority of the first few books in survival mode. How did she not realize this was happening? Or how did she not at least think, this is weird.
or thinking something is wrong and being proactive about it. That's where she literally is ignoring this fact because, again, I feel like she's just so caught up in with her blinders on.
She's so in tunnel vision with her revenge right now. Oh my God. It's painful to read because you're like, you're like, I'll pull a Lucien. You're smarter than this, Feyre.
Quote, what a valiant effort you put up trying to shield them all from us. Feyre's narration has been smug, where she goes toe-to-toe with these powerful Hybern royals. And while she has been able to shield, the way that they're emphasizing trying to shield them all makes me wonder if she hasn't been nearly as successful as she thinks with the shielding. I know that we don't have any examples of where anyone has acted, I'll say, out of character, where they would have infiltrated their minds. But it does make me wonder with that emphasis on the trying. They do confirm that they know she was planning to vanish today, but of course they can't have that, hence why they gave her an extra dose of Faebane to knock out her powers entirely for a few days. Knowing she has very limited time left with her magic and unwilling to leave Lucian to a fate worse than death, Feyre goes toe-to-toe with Dagden.
Before Dagden can even comprehend, Feyre winnows right in front of him and slices through the front of his letters. Not enough to kill him, though. She uses her same winnow, strike method that she used when she was rescuing Rhys from Hybern's clutches last book. And, quote, months of Cassian's brutal training clicked into place as I kept my feet under me. Thank goodness for all of those training montages last book. Now, I do want to address something real quick because some people are like, she only was trained for a few months. Like, how is she good enough to go up against Dagden? So much so that Lucian and Branna are like, what the fuck? Like, oh my God, he's like actually got a match here. She was trained by the best warrior in Prythian, Cassian. So while, yes, she's done many less years of training, I mean, Dagden's over 1,000, her education was so pristine that it is like collapsing a lot of those years of training.
I do agree. And I also just think, plot convenience and she's our hero. But the King of Hybern, now he is super powerful with his magic, but I will argue, I don't think that he's quite as adept on the battlefield because Elaine literally sneaks up on him and stabs him.
Drag Elaine. Why don't
No, I meant that as a good thing. He doesn't have that same awareness where he let that happen. So I do think that while the King of Hybern, as powerful as he is, and he was their mentor most likely, it was more on emphasis on their powers and their magic versus this Illyrian style training that Cassian has always needed to rely on, and he has been teaching Feyre.
That's a great point. Yes. Feyre notices that his blows aren't hard and instead are just enough to wait until the Faebane from the apple kicks in. So Feyre decides to hit him where he is weakest. This is Feyre is smart. She is intelligent. She's using those smarts right now. Thank God. She engulfs Branna in flame, which Branna had a weak physical shield around her because she was expecting Feyre to attack her with Daemati powers, which is fair because I believe she's only been using her Daemati gifts in front of them. So it makes sense that's what they thought she was rely on, which they either forgot that she has the powers of all the courts or they didn't know.
I absolutely agree with you. Going back to our conversation just a few moments ago, I wonder if, yes, they do have 1,000 years of training on Feyre, but they have not seen real action in decades or even centuries, while Feyre has more recent experience going up against a true enemy. So she's just thinking more smartly than they are in that way. She was also trained to not only rely on one power and to take advantage of everything she has at her disposal. Her smarts, hand-to-hand fighting, and High Lord powers. Going back to taking these twins' measures over the past fortnight, well, one of those measures was seeing how close they are. So she knew exactly how to get the upper hand from this Hybern royal.
Dagden, seeing his twin literally engulfed in flame, continues his blows, but now is super pissed. And Lucian uses this opportunity to skewer Branna with his sword. I love when Lucian and Feyre are working together as a team. This is just, I love this so much. And I love that Lucian, who hates these people a lot, he gets to act on his revenge too. It's not just Feyre committing murder. Quote, a tremor shuddered through the clearing, like some thread between the twins had been snipped as Branna's dark head thudded to the grass.
Huzzah! Huzzah! Huzzah!
Yes, I love it. Dagden turns on Lucian and is now really pissed, and he trudges to murder Lucian. But Feyre winnows right in front of him, and before he can realize it, she punches her dagger through his eye, quote, right into the skull behind it. Yummy. Good fucking riddance. But oh yeah, Ianthe's still here. So Feyre amends her earlier command, instead telling her Daemati style that she, Feyre, killed them in defense while her, Ianthe, and Tamlin did nothing.
Lucian now insists on going with Feyre to the Night Court, mainly because he is determined to get his mate back. But he also knows Feyre won't make it all the way up Prythian through 5 courts without her magic. And being the one more familiar with the courts and the terrain, he brings up a very good point that she won't survive the trek without his expertise. For example, they're debating whether to go to autumn or summer, and while autumn is just as dangerous as the summer court, he knows those lands and where they can go to at least have a chance of staying out of sight. Feyre lets him come more so because she doesn't want to waste precious time debating, because again, they are on a real quick timer here with their magic running out. I'll argue too that while she mistrusts him, those feelings we talked about earlier are rooted in her. At her core, she likes Lucien, even when she wants to hate him. They have been through a lot together this past year, and they've recently become unlikely allies since Hybern's arrival as they unite against a common enemy.
She's hesitant at first to let him join because, like you said, time is of the essence, and so she does have to make a fast decision. So she says, quote, "Don't make me regret this." And honestly, fair. Lucien has been loyal to Tamlin for centuries, years, and she doesn't know also if he's saying, hey, like, I'm going to come with you in honest terms, in, hey, I actually want to go and like get my mate back, or if he's going and playing spy, because everyone's a fucking spy in this book. So she doesn't know if his intentions are true. Although I will argue that if he is a spy and they get any, sniff of him being a spy, Cassian and Azriel would eat him alive. So it is what it is.
His decision to leave the Spring Court is so significant for Lucien. He made this his home after he ran away from the Autumn Court. And sadly, here he is having to escape his second home. On the one hand, we can place the blame with Feyre and the wedge she drove between Tamlin and Lucien. But we've also called out the theme that Lucien has always worked for Tamlin. Yes, they're close, and yes, they're friends. But at the end of every day, Tamlin is his High Lord and never lets him forget it. Lucien wants to have a home. He wants to have love and to be of value to those around him. He may hate the Night Court. Remember what we've been saying about how it's completely fair for him and Tamlin to feel the way they do about Rhys and the Night Court. But the one person in this world who gives him hope for a better future is in the Night Court. And he is seizing his chance to start over with her.
And also, he still believes that Elaine is in enemy hands in the Night Court, which Feyre judges him for. She thinks that he's being like this territorial Fae male and not leaving the Spring Court because Tamlin's wrong, but instead because you think you're getting what you're owed, basically, which is a very Tamlin way of thinking. Let's be real. That's exactly why he went to Hybern. That's exactly why he's done a lot of things that he did in ACOWAR. And I guess given Lucien's proximity to Tamlin, I get why she does think that here. But she also knows Lucien, and that is not why Lucien would go to the Night Court at the end of the day. I do think that he is going because he believes that Elaine is in enemy hands. Like you said, fairly so, given what he's seen and known about the Night Court.
I will also say I would not want to stick around and deal with the Spring Court fallout that Feyre has obviously set in motion, not to mention deal with Tamlin's wrath again. Like, Lucien is just probably like, I can't deal with this. I can't deal with this.
Good for mental health, my guy.
There's the question of why Lucien's powers stutter out as fast as Feyre's when he did not eat the same apple with a concentrated dose of Faebane. And the answer is she's that much more powerful than him, and the Hybern twins knew it too. His magic has similarly dwindled because he's been eating Faebane food too, but he had less power to begin with, so that's why their powers go out at the same time despite him eating less Faebane. Before they go through the Autumn Court door, we get a little more insight into Feyre's thought process with taking down the Spring Court. Because no, apparently we have not talked about it enough. She thinks how she debated for weeks whether it would be better to let it fall to Hybern, which would then make the other courts inclined to side against Hybern and with the Night Court charge as one against Hybern, or for the Night Court to claim the Spring Court. Bring in an Illyrian legion to take the territory when it was weakest after she caused it to implode. Yes, because she is absolutely looking out for the people of the Spring Court. However, she chose against this path, not because of all the innocent people, although I like to think that the Illyrians wouldn't kill the innocents. But anyway, the Night Court would then hold only one territory, and with 5 other courts between them. And one court taking over another court is not a good look and might make the other courts sympathize with Hybern and fight against the Night Court, which is the last thing they want to have happen. No matter what, the Spring Court cannot stay neutral. It borders the wall and the mortal realm. Tamlin has already made a bargain with Hybern to get Feyre back, so he simply can't back out and side with the other courts at this point. With that not being an option, there really aren't many choices left. For how much shit I give Feyre for handling the implosion of the Spring Court and the repercussions, she does have a really good point here. I just wish she and Tamlin could have come together to discuss taking advantage of this Hybern alliance to come up with a plan C. Or, I don't know, look inside his head and learn his true intentions, because apparently he hasn't been shielding. And she looks inside other people's heads, but not his.
I will give Feyre this, as we're closing out this moment in the Spring Court. If I had to narrow this down into one sentence of how I feel about Feyre in the Spring Court, it is strategic warfare with very few casualties, because I'm not including Ianthe and the Lannister twins in this, because fuck them. They deserved what they got.
They're not innocent casualties. Exactly.
Yeah. I think overall, based on her feelings, based on her anger, based on her need for revenge, it all makes sense. I just wish her inner monologue was a little bit less. And if I would have asked, they would have turned around and stabbed themselves in the gut. Like, I just wish it was a little less like that, because that just doesn't feel like Feyre.
Yeah. Anyway, let's go to the Autumn Court, shall we?
We already reached part 2 of our tale, and we're only at chapter 11. We spend most of the time of the book in this part 2, and it is called Cursebreaker. The symbolism that I took here is it's Feyre going right back to the I will make it happen mindset that we have seen from her so much throughout this series, and that we saw from her under the mountain when she became Feyre Cursebreaker. I'm not saying that she was a lovesick girl who got in way over her head. I'm more meaning she is the I have one goal and I will do anything to make it happen version of Feyre. This next part of the book is messy. Deals with the Bone Carver and Bryaxis, attacks on Valaris, the High Lords meeting. Feyre is driven in this part of the book by wanting to create a better world. She has one goal and she's doing anything she can to go after it, which is the Feyre Cursebreaker style.
I love that. Yep. She's also still gaining her footing as High Lady of the Night Court. She has become comfortable with her title as Feyre Cursebreaker. So I think this part 2 title illustrates her continuing to come into her own on this journey as she fully embraces being High Lady. And that's all I've got for that analysis. I think you did very good there.
Thank you very much.
Oh, man. May I just say that if the Autumn Court was ruled by better people, it would absolutely positively be my court. I love Autumn. It is my favorite season, but I realize that I lean more toward the Winter Court because we get more details about it. But wow, rereading these descriptions of the Autumn Court just make me so happy. I just want to jump through the pages and stroll through these colorful woods. Like my heart would be so happy. Without her magic, Feyre feels blind again, which I just love this concept of how much she's been relying on her powers these past few months. I realized that Nicole and I at the very top of our episode 1 were saying that one of our faults with this book is that she doesn't display her powers as much. And I want to be clear that we're not talking about like this part of it, like how she just like uses them on a day-to-day basis. It is about when she is in battle. But I do love just kind of like peeling back the layers here, and who is she without her magic now? She used to be a human. She knows better than any other Fae how to survive without powers, especially in the woods. But she's learned how to use her variety of powers to her advantage over a very short amount of time. Casting a net of awareness for tracing nearby Fae, shifting her eyes into nocturnal creatures' eyes so that she can see better, winnowing, the list goes on and on. Remember how Rhys's mother made him train as an Illyrian so he wouldn't rely solely on his powers? This is why. Because powers are not guaranteed. Your power can be depleted, like it was for Rhys in the prologue, or in rare cases like this, it is nullified. Feyre knows how to survive the woods without magic, but it has been over a year since she's done that because she's been so focused on training her powers and learning how to leverage them in any and all instances. Like, again, she's been so focused on needing to learn about her powers and know how to use them so that she can use them all the time that now when they're taken away from her, she's like, oh my God, what do I do? Feyre will soon learn how she could have used the last remnants of her power to send a message to Rhys. And hey, I get it. She had a lot going on in the moment, fighting the Hybern twins to the death, but her power didn't completely vanish until hours later. Yes, she was focused on getting away, got to get to the Autumn Court door before Tamlin finds out. Though this is another subtle hint at her inexperience, or maybe it's just plot convenience.
Well, why didn't, as she was like packing her bag, she like say down the bond, hey, I'm like, this is like when you're.
That would have been a great. Yes.
Like, I know when I'm leaving a place, like I normally text my husband, like, hey, I'm on my way home. This is the version of that. Like, why are you not texting your husband, hey, I'm on my way home? That would have
been really good. Yeah, because all I was thinking about was after the Hybern twins were killed, like she knew that she had very limited time left with her power, and she couldn't have sent off like a little like SOS alert.
Or like I'll even, because she normally multitasks when she's using her Daemati powers. She was shielding 3 people, like nobody's business for weeks. I'm just whatever.
Cauldron, boil me.
Boil me.
As much as Lucien no longer considers the Autumn Court his home, and especially now that we know he is the son of the High Lord of the Day Court, I love seeing him back in his element here in his homeland. He takes them to an old campsite of his in a cave, and Feyre thinks how it's been years since it was touched, and yeah, it's been at the very least 50 years. We don't have an exact timeline of when Lucien went to the Spring Court, but we know it was well before Amarantha. So if I had to make a guess, I would say 90 years to 110, somewhere in that range. The conversation turns to the elephant in the room. There is deception in the Spring Court. Lucien says he knew she was lying the moment she unleashed that light in Hybern, because his friend in the Dawn Court has the same power and it doesn't spell cleave like Feyre made it out to be. So anyway, because there was what court is this from? And they assumed that it was the Day Court, but it does seem that it is not the Day Court. It was Dawn Court.
Well, and then later in the High Lords meeting, when Helion comes up to her, she's like, oh, the person who I get my glowy powers from. But every single time she gets her glowy powers, she describes it as starlight. Wink, wink.
When Feyre asks why he, as, quote, the faithful dog, didn't tell Tamlin, Lucien gives 2 reasons. Number 1, it felt like kicking a male already down. He didn't want to take the hope away from Tamlin. In other words, Tamlin wouldn't have listened and gotten mad at him?
Oh, yeah. He would have destroyed a room and gotten pissed at him.
And number 2, if he was correct that she was a double agent and called her out on it, Feyre would make sure he never saw his mate Elaine again. It always comes back to Elaine. Feyre and Lucien are on 2 opposite sides viewing the situation with Elaine. Lucien believes that she is in enemy's clutches and she is in danger. Again, as we've said, fair assumption. And then Feyre knows for a fact that her sister is not in danger. Otherwise, quote, no High Lord or King would have kept me from going to save them. Again, a fair point, and one that Lucien himself has brought up in question of her loyalty to the Spring Court. But hey, the mask is off now, and honestly, it's a breath of fresh air for them to be able to talk candidly.
So they have several options. Go straight north, which is the fastest route, but it does risk them running into the Autumn Court sentries and royals. Go east and risk running into the Summer Court, which we'll talk about that in a second. Or go west and lose time, but it definitely has the least amount of risks. So as Lexi and I just realized going into the map, those are backwards.
Yeah, because at first I was like, wait, no, Nicole, going east is going towards the Autumn Court coast and going west is Summer Court.
Correct.
And Nicole even just pulled up the book and nope, that is what it says. So I don't know where Summer Court and east come in.
So something got turned around, I think, and I guess it just did not get caught in editing. So that, whoops. So if we're going solely based off of the map, I would have gone east. I would have gone east so fast because not only are you the furthest away from Hybern, you are going in a way that is not taking you through straight enemy territory, and you're the farthest away from the Summer Court. Also, if you're on the coast, it would probably be easiest for the Illyrians, aka the Bat Boys, to come and get you. And also, you're wasting time because you need the Faebane to wear off. Feyre, I know the better than the dude who grew up here, Archeron. God. As they travel, Lucien and Feyre talk about what life was like for the former growing up. Lucian mentions how, as the youngest of 7 sons, he wasn't needed or wanted, which is sad, but that ended up actually being a good thing at the time. He could study longer than any of his brothers, and since they were all rulers of some territory and he was not, he could train as long as he wanted, since no one thought he'd be stupid enough to kill his way up the line of succession of heirs, which, pause, in book 1, it's mentioned how in Autumn Court, it's not based off of who's the oldest. Instead, it's based off of who is the strongest. And that is like a main conversation that Tamlin and Feyre have at the Pool of Starlight about Lucian and his family. But it's okay because now it's Aerys who is the heir because he's the oldest.
Yes, I've also always taken it where Aerys is the most powerful, including in the battles here. He does seem to be the one who winnows and brings his brother with him winnowing. He's the one who uses the most amount of power. Feyre even makes a comment about how, oh my God, is he really this powerful? Like when he was melting the ice. So I do think that while technically it is not the eldest, it is the strongest. He just happens to be the eldest and strongest.
I agree. However, the narrative around how the line of succession has completely changed.
You're correct there, yes.
Cauldron, boil me. So when Lucian would get bored of training and studying, he instead would go and learn about the land that he lives on and learn everything that he could. So Feyre in the scene says to Lucian, quote, "I'd say that sounds more High Lord-like than the son of an idle, unwanted son." High Lord foreshadowing alert for our guy Lucian. I hope he ends up High Lord of the Day Court or Spring. I would probably think Day though, given his spell cleaving powers. But she asks if he would want it, the High Lord crown.
I love the little detail that no one has asked him this before.
How has Tamlin's never asked him that before?
Oh, I'm not surprised by that in the slightest.
I'm more just mad. I'm not surprised. I'm disappointed.
It's such a far-fetched idea, being 7th in line and assumably not as powerful as at least Aerys. But it's a sincere question. And like Nicole said, priming us for a possibility of indeed becoming a High Lord.
Absolutely.
Although I will say, I don't want Helion to die. So him becoming High Lord of the Day Court means that Helion has to die first. And so I just want him to become heir to the Day Court so that Helion can still live a long, wonderful life.
Knowing SJM's storytelling, I don't see a scenario where Lucian will not end up as a High Lord, whether that's of Spring or as Day. But I would assume Day, given that's where his succession is.
Yes.
Lucian is really unique to our story. He has yet a place to call his home. The Autumn Court was anything but warm and fuzzy because of its brutal nature and the outright hatred his brothers and father had, and especially when Jasminda died. Even the people of the Autumn Court shunned Lucian out of the full territory in this moment because of what happened with Jasminda. More on this in a moment. Later, Feyre will introduce him to Amren as Lucian Van Sarah, which is his Autumn Court surname, which Lucian promptly says that he does not use his family name. Yes, I did try to look up the meaning of this last name, and apparently it is so rare that it doesn't really have a meaning. So there you go. Lucian obviously does not have a home in the Day Court, given the fact that he has no idea he's even tied to it. And then, of course, there is the Spring Court, which is probably the closest to a home by a long shot. But like Lexi mentioned earlier, it was always more of a job than a home. Tamlin was High Lord first and foremost. He bossed Lucian around to the point that when Feyre admits that it will all fall, it's not enough to make Lucian stay and turn around and go back and help. Later, when him and Feyre are talking in one of the caves, Feyre says to him, quote, "You fit in the Spring Court as little as I did, Lucian. You enjoyed its pleasures and diversions, but don't pretend you weren't made for something more than that." What a dig at the Spring Court. Which is why when he finds his found family in the Band of Exiles, I'm just like, I'm so happy. I can't wait to talk about that in Silver Flames. I'm just so happy for him.
As we look ahead to ACOWAR 6, I really hope for more Lucian plot. There is so much unknown for him, and I want him to have his happily ever after, whether that's with Elaine or as High Lord of the Day Court or heir to it, like we were just saying, or finding his place on the continent with the Band of Exiles, or maybe even with Vassa. I was going to ship him and Vassa.
Lucian also opens up about what happened with Jasminda, which was his previous lover. Feyre asks why the people of the Autumn Court would happily turn him in if they found him and Feyre running through the woods. woods. Turns out that Jasminda was a lesser fairy. She was murdered by his father and brothers. And when she was, the people of the Autumn Court looked at her death as Lucian not caring enough to stop her demise. Quote, and when I didn't protect her, it was a betrayal of their trust too. I ran to some of their houses while fleeing my brothers. They turned me out for what I let happen to her.
My heart breaks when Feyre exclaims how awful that is, and he responds that he can't blame them for it. In other words, he blames himself and will carry that guilt forever.
This moment changed the course of Lucian's life forever. It is what drove him out of the Autumn Court and into Spring. It is what now makes him so hard to watch innocents brutally murdered and injured. Remember the lost member of the Blue Man group back in ACOWAR. And he thought Jasminda was his mate, and he was waiting for their mating bond to snap into place. He now has found his mate, who is hurt and who he needs to make sure is okay, which I believe this is a huge reason as to why he is leaving the Spring Court to the Night Court, because of that guilt that he feels. We might be cruising through the Autumn Court, but here in our human realm, it is hot. There's no greater threat to your hot girl summer than summer swamp ass. Such a buzzkill, right? Thankfully, MeUndies has us covered during the warmer months with lightweight, anti-odor, and quick-drying breathe fabrics. Perfect for a hike through Prithian. MeUndies has so many different styles of breathe underwear, and they are all incredibly cool and comfortable. From high-waisted or hipster during that time of the month, or to cheeky briefs or bikinis when you're feeling yourself, MeUndies has a cut for every butt this summer.
I love MeUndies. It's seriously the first pair of underwear I look for in my drawer because they are so soft and breathable, and the patterns are so much fun to wear. My favorite pair is my da-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na house's pattern, so I can embrace my inner winter is coming.
MeUndies has 10 different styles, ranging from cute boy shorts to thongs to even lace options that are actually comfortable. You know what I mean. These cuts come in over 100 different colors and prints, ranging from black to your zodiac sign to my favorite narwhal pair. I love them. And my favorite part of MeUndies is that they use sustainably sourced materials and work with partners that truly care for their workers.
Plus, if you're not happy with your first pair of undies, it's on MeUndies. Summer is coming. Get every cut for your butt from MeUndies. Yes, we love saying that. I'm going to say it one more time. Get every cut for your butt from MeUndies. Get 20% off your first order plus free shipping at MeUndies.com/FFG. That's MeUndies.com/FFG for 20% off plus free shipping. MeUndies, comfort from the outside in. And get every cut for your butt.
Get every cut for your butt. After days of hiking together through the Autumn Court, the harsh bite of their anger, or at least Lucian's anger, has softened quite a bit. He thanks her for having his back with Ianthe and the Lannister twins. He gives her credit for how expertly she took down Dagden, even when she's trying to brush it off and, chalk it up to the element of surprise. He's like, but no, own it. Own your power. I love Lucian. Then one night when she is finally asleep, her Daemati powers keep creeping back in and out as if she was looking through Lucian's eyes, and she sees him remove his cloak and puts it over her like a blanket.
It's so cute. It's so sweet. I love this moment so much because, yes, it offers a glimpse into her powers slowly returning, but also of the emotional journey she and Lucian have been on during this trek.
I love this friendship. I am so sad that it does feel like Lucian has his band of exiles, and I'm so happy he has his own friends, but I love Lucian and Feyre's friendship so much. So why, after being so angry with Feyre initially, does Lucian soften up only after a few days? I do think it's multiple reasons. Number one, I think that's just who Lucian is, or else he never would have stuck around so long in the Spring Court with Tamlin and how he treated him. Two, they're sort of family now. He is mates with her sister, and I don't think that this is him kissing up to the sister, although I'm not going to lie, from experience, that does work. So just being honest, I do think that this is more him seeing it as taking care of someone who's really close to him. And three, shit from the Spring Court or not, they are friends and a team. And after having a few days to cool off, he is starting to open up the idea to seeing things from her side. I'm not saying he's fully there, but he's starting to open up the idea to seeing things from her side.
But oh dear, it's not all beautiful autumn leaves and bountiful fruits and fish in the autumn court, because Lucian's brothers have found them. Dun dun dun. Someone somewhere figured out Lucian and Feyre were traveling through the court, and 3 of the 4 remaining autumn court brothers have gone to fetch them and bring them to Baron, High Lord of the Autumn Court, which, needless to say, can't happen for our 2 travelers. I will say, when I first read this, I thought for sure they were going and they were going to be going to the forest house and they were going to be having to escape from there, because there was a little bit of that foreshadowing. But anyway, maybe someday we'll get to the forest house. Eris is one of these 3 brothers, and boy, oh boy, do I have some questions for you, good sir. This isn't technically Feyre's first encounter with the High Lord's son, who left Moore to die in the woods, but it is the first time that she knows who he is by name, so she can put a name to the face. And that innate hatred for him immediately washes over her. Eris is quite the character, to say the least, and I'm just so excited to dive more into him this book and beyond, because as of right now, he certainly seems like a real bad guy through and through. And thanks to his upbringing and torture from his father, it's no surprise that he is the way he is. But we'll later learn he isn't quite as evil as we think, and that's where we stamp a big old question mark right next to him. First of all, Lucian is saying Eris and warning. Is that warning to leave them alone because he knows his brother will understand behind the mask that they need to get away? Or does Eris indeed plan on bringing them to the forest house, and then what? Does he let them escape? Or does he truly consider them his enemy right now, where without gaining something in return, like later in the book, he has no issue turning them into their ultimate deaths?
That one. I'm leaning towards that one, because he has no reason to befriend Lucian like he does Rhys in the Night Court later on.
That's not necessarily true, because he has always known that Lucian is not necessarily a threat to him, and he was the one who helped his brother escape what all happened in the Autumn Court years and years ago, and he's the one who called in Tamlin.
I stand corrected. I don't know.
To your point, though, I do think that he might really consider them his enemies right now, or at least he considers Feyre his enemy right now.
I think so.
Yeah. Still, big question mark next to him. But with these brothers cornering them and being in the Autumn Court, Feyre can feel the Faebane wearing off and fire is calling to her. I absolutely love that she feels a particular draw to the High Lord magic when she's in their court. I feel like that's becoming like one of my new favorite world building tropes. Is that a thing? World building tropes?
Sure.
Feyre uses her Illyrian training to get out of their grasp, and then takes advantage of her limited power that's coming back to her to create a wall of fire so she and Lucian can escape.
I love the moment when Lucian only like slightly bobs his chin, and that's her sign to strike. Like, I these 2 as a team, I love them. I love them.
She and Lucian both use their firepower to bring down the cave ceiling and stop his brothers from following them. Phew! Crisis averted. For now.
Dun, dun, dun. But as they go further north, it's getting colder and colder, which thank goodness these 2 are high fae, because that is probably what's keeping them alive right now. They eventually find a cave, which shields them from the wind and from sight of Lucian's brothers finding them. These 2 huddle for the only option of warmth, body heat, since their fire magic has been completely depleted. Feeling like they are very near death, Feyre's thoughts drift to Rhys. And Lucian finally speaks up. He says, quote, "Tell me about her, about Elaine," Lucian says quietly, as if the death that squatted in the dark beside us had drawn his thoughts to his own mate as well. Oh, I love that. So Feyre tells him about her sister, specifically about her gardening and how Elaine would get down and dirty and tend to the garden herself. When Lucian asks her about Feyre's using past tense as if Elaine's dead, Feyre admits that she doesn't know how much Elaine has changed since going into the Cauldron, and boy, oh boy, she ain't wrong. She admits that Elaine would probably yearn back for the human lands. And Lucian says, quote, "Surely Prythian is a better alternative, war or no." Lucian is showing a little bit of his own naivete here. He's never crossed the wall, at least as far as we know. Now, to be fair, most of the time he has spent with a human was Feyre, and she did not have very nice things to say about the human realm. So this is truly him not knowing any better. But it is a little bit of that naivete of like, why would someone want to go back to the human lands? But Feyre hits him with the dagger punch. Quote, "She is engaged, Lucian." He did not know about Grayson. And like any mate at first, he is in shock and his primal jealousy comes out. He says, quote, "My mate is engaged to a human male. He spoke more to himself than to me. This breaks my heart. Like, just let Lucian cut him a break. Cut my guy a break. Let him have easy love for fucking once, please. Lucian says that he wants to see her at least once to know that if she's worth fighting for. And Feyre cannot bring herself to say that she absolutely is. Quote from Lucian, "And then I'll ask your mate how he survived it, knowing you were engaged to someone else, sharing another male's bed." Lucian is a territorial Fae male, as exhibited with his cold and lethal, "my mate is engaged," but I love that he is leaning much more towards the Rhys side of things when it comes to dealing with it. He is thinking, okay, I'm going to learn how to give her own space and let her make her own decisions, which obviously is a basic human right here, but not always when it comes to Prithian Fae males. Speaking of Rhys, though, he asks when Feyre stopped loving Tamlin and started loving Rhys instead. It's not an outright rude way. It's more of a, I'm pissed at you, but let me understand. But Feyre does not answer. Like, literally, she stays quiet. And I get if she's not ready to have the full download with him. Like, she mentions not wanting to tell him the full, chapter 54 retelling because it's not her story to share. But anything to the guy who just left the spring court with you and is heading to the night court, like something.
I know.
It's painful. I'm so I was like, why can't you say anything to him? Then
I will say she is caught in a very difficult situation because she does not want to reveal any of the Night Court secrets right now, which would show how Rhys is actually a good person. And at the same time, she's trusting Lucian to understand and trust her that Rhys is not as bad as he thinks without her having to outright say it.
Exactly. And no shit, that doesn't work. Of course. Lucian's anger simmers to the surface again, accusing her of starting things up with Rhys before she even permanently left the Spring Court. And note that this is the first time that he says you left the Spring Court rather than you were taken from the Spring Court. I just think that was a very interesting word choice. And Lucian says, quote, "Yet this is the male you now love." I'd say this is a low blow, but he has no idea. He's asking questions, and I would argue that he wants to understand here. But what he knows about Rhys is the evil High Lord of Night who made Feyre dance for him under the mountain every single night, who tricked her into a bargain. So naturally, he's like, how did you get from A to B? Or worse, he's thinking, how did Feyre get from the girl she was in ACOWAR to where Rhys is, on his level that Lucian believes Rhys is on, at least? It all comes to blows with Lucian saying, quote, "You left us, not Tamlin, us." And then Feyre says, quote, "And a small, horrible part of me enjoyed the thought of taking one more thing away from Tamlin, something vital, something essential." This is relatable for Feyre. Yeah, this is petty revenge, sure, but I've thought this about people who've wronged me. I'm going to be real. You know when you have an ex who is really good friends with someone, and when you're together with that person, you become really good friends with that person. And then maybe the ex does something really terrible. And then in the, what's the word? In the casualties of the breakup, that friend actually just gets to be your friend and they cut off ties with the ex. And you feel a little proud.
Yeah. So I agree with you there. However, I think there are some blurred lines here because she's using Lucian as a pawn. Yes. And it's not necessarily, he can bringing him over onto my side, but it is a thinking of him as a pawn as she has been thinking about him. I feel so bad for him being caught in the middle of Feyre and Tamlin.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. I especially love these chapter stretches because we get to go to new places and experience these other courts we've only heard of. I think we're in every court except the day court in this book, right, Nicole?
Yep, correct.
Based on this winter court experience, I understand why it's not the most popular court people would want to live in. But I personally, I know you, but
this is my personal hell. I hate this place so much.
Well, I can understand that given, again, where we are here. But I marvel at how the Fae of the winter court have adapted to this harsh environment. Even though we only get a glimpse into their culture when their army meets up with the rest of Prithian forces. And, we learn more about the little foxes who send the messages and the bears and how they travel. I absolutely love it so much. Just give me a short story of Vivian living life to the fullest in the winter court. I would love to live in the winter court, but of course I definitely want to live in the palace and the good part of it versus really
You don't
cool
want to live
part.
on the frozen lake, Lexi? I don't understand. Fighting for your life.
I do love the show alone, but I don't want to like actually go there. While trudging through the Winter Quartz Mountains, Feyre keeps trying to reach Rhys in their bond as the effects of the Faebane ever so slowly fade. We won't get confirmation until a little while later that he does pick up in the bond again and sends Cassian, Azriel, and Mor on the rescue mission to fetch them in the Winter Court because he is so far away himself on the continent. More on this shortly. As they're walking across a frozen, endless lake, though, Lucian's brothers are back. Feyre and Lucian are supposed to be safe from the brothers once they cross the border into the Winter Court because the Autumn Court High Lord's sons weren't supposed to be able to cross the borders and kill within a different court. The law says that the High Lord can do whatever they want with trespassers threatening the peace of his land. I'm guessing that if he came across Feyre and Lucian, they would have been able to argue that they were trespassing, but they had peaceful intentions, right? And then Lucian's brothers are literally there to kill them. She thinks that once they're over the border, quote, Eris and the others wouldn't dare set foot in another court's territory. I'm guessing his brothers just don't care about the regulations of chasing them into another territory because they are gung-ho on getting them back to the Autumn Court. Court rules aside, Eris has them trapped as he melts the ice they're running on. Arrows are flying at them, but don't worry, they don't seem to be ash arrows. Throwing caution to the wind about her secret of having all 7 High Lords' powers, Feyre uses Khaleesi's ice powers to re-ice the lake they're running across. I love it, where it's very much like whoosh, 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 whoosh.
That's very Elsa from Frozen.
That's exactly, that's what I was thinking of, yes. But Eris can winnow, and the brother he winnowed with shoots an arrow through Feyre's arm.
Eris gives them an ultimatum. Go under the freezing water, and when they need to get out in order not to die, Eris will take them to his father. Or skip all of that and just come with him now and go back to the Autumn Court.
These brothers' goal isn't to kill them right now. Emphasis on the right now, but instead take them back to the Autumn Court and have just a chat with Baron, which of course would be a death sentence in and of itself. So an epic fight breaks out on the ice.
And oh yeah, Feyre's powers are starting to rise to the surface. Thank God.
She uses her blinding white light to distract the brothers, and she runs away toward the distant shore. But shoot, Eris can still winnow and strike as well. He starts punching her, first in the face and then in her gut.
He just assaulted a high lady. Like, yes, he does not know, but technically this is an act of war.
That's partly why he's so scared when he does find out. Meanwhile, Lucian is back with the other 2 brothers, and they're fighting with metal, so clashing of swords and fire blasting. Pew, 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 pew.
I didn't realize we entered the Empire Strikes Back territory. Eris drags her by her hair and forces a gag of fire over her mouth and flame bands around her ankles and wrists. Things are not looking good. Until
a shadow slammed into the earth before us, cracking the ice toward every horizon. Not a shadow, an Illyrian warrior. Cassian has come to save the day! Oh my God, I tear up just like Feyre every time I read this part. He's whole, he's strong, his impressive wingspan is healed. I'm so happy. I'm so happy. And he has 5 centuries worth of rage to take out on Eris right now. But what's this? Another impact struck the ice behind us. Shadows skittered in its wake. Azriel's here too, everybody! And the sight of them are home to Feyre. The last time she saw her 2 friends was over a month ago, and they were badly injured from the catastrophic Hybern mission. She has been so worried about them and how they're healing, and here they are to save their High Lady when she needs them most. Oh my gosh, I'm like actually starting to tear up right now. Because of course they are. We love you so much, Cassian and Azriel. And Cassian says with lethal calm, I suggest you drop my lady. Goosebumps!
So how the heck did they know where to find Feyre? After the bond vanished about a week ago, Rhys winnowed straight to the spring court in a panic, thinking that Feyre was dead, and sneakily looked around for his mate. And the bond continued to be dark for days and days, until literally minutes ago when Rhys picked up on it. He was over on the edge of the human realm on the continent spying on the mortal queens, since Azriel was only recently back on his feet after the Hybern injury. So Rhys has taken it upon himself to do some of his spy work.
Because things are quiet, too quiet, with the mortal queens holed up in their palace.
So Rhys over on the continent knew that Cassian, Azriel, and Mor were closest to where Feyre was. And he was like, go get her. Mor winnowed Cassian and Azriel in, but knowing that the relations with the Winter Court were strained, it would be better if Mor was in the middle, keeping Khaleesi's eyes north, looking at her, rather than south, looking at the fight. Also, a nice bonus is that she gets to avoid an interaction with Eris, aka her ex-betrothed, who left her to die in the Autumn Court with nothing but a note nailed to her abdomen. Good guy, Eris. ? However, there is also a theory that he has some dirt on her, which means that she also would want to avoid an encounter where he could dig up her secrets and share them, but we'll save that for a future episode.
I will say that when she's like, oh, and also I just didn't want to see Eris, my first thought is like, yeah, I'm pretty sure that was the primary reason why you didn't go. Yeah.
Oh, 100%. And Feyre understands. She's like, yeah, I get it. Like, that's a traumatic experience. Like, you don't worry about it.
Cassian, ever the trainer, gives Feyre a silent command to defend herself. He taught her how to get out of situations like this, quote, as if he'd known that it was a very real possibility that this scenario would one day happen. I like that she has it in her to get out of Eris's clutches, but she was spiraling into defeat, and with Cassian's presence and silent encouragement, she's able to get back into that fight mode. She may be still bound by his fire ropes, but she knocks Eris off balance and drives her fist into his nose to break free of his grasp. While Cassian and Eris enter an epic sword fight, Azriel and Lucien are battling against his other two brothers. I love how the Autumn Court sentries are shooting arrows of just plain wood and magic only to bounce off Azriel's siphon shield. Like, how useless are they? Using the ice in her veins to smother the fire ropes binding her, Feyre realizes that if Cassian and Azriel kill these three brothers, it'll make the Night Court look real bad. And right now, in times of war, they can't risk worse tensions with Baron when they desperately need him on their side. No matter how bloodthirsty they are for revenge and feel Lucien's brothers deserve to die for what they've done, like their initiation on this Icy Lake battle, and also what Eris did to Mor 500 years ago, and what they did to Lucien and the woman he loved. Note how this is different than her gleeful revenge against Tamlin, because the Spring Court had already allied with Hybern, so it was, for all intents and purposes, a lost cause to rally to Hybern's side. If they thought they could still get Tamlin to fight against Hybern, I have a feeling she would have reined in her personal emotions, at least a little bit. But instead, all bets were off, so she felt free to unleash her revenge against Tamlin. Baron, on the other hand, can still be convinced to side with Prythian. But, probably only if the people he has to ally with don't, kill 3 of his 4 remaining sons. So the High Lady of the Night Court commands her Illyrian warriors to stop.
It's notable that Cassian and Azriel don't always do this directly obedient stop and then they follow suit. See later when Cassian almost gets gutted while simultaneously not following Rhys's orders in battle. But I do wonder if they immediately follow her orders here because they know, first of all, I think that they're doing it just because it is the smart thing to do. But they also know how badass and powerful it would look to Eris and the rest of the Autumn boys.
I think them not obeying orders is more of an anomaly than a regular thing. Like, Cassian went against Rhys's orders because he did what he thought was best for their forces and for their greater purpose. As the commander of these armies, he has to use his best judgment sometimes when he's in the thick of things. And Rhys, in that case, wasn't, if I remember that correctly. But here, they are serving and protecting their High Lady and will obey her unless there's a really good reason not to. And personal revenge isn't a good enough reason even to them.
Good point. Feyre removes the glamour she's had on herself for weeks, revealing the tattoo and the markings of her new title and mating bond. She says, quote, "I am High Lady of the Night Court." Chills. Couple things to note. Number 1 is that Lucien's color on his face just drains completely. He is now realizing who he's been traveling with for, almost a week. He's now realizing who's been chilling and fucking up things in the Spring Court. Not just a doe-eyed damsel. She's the High Lady of the Night Court. He's realizing that, oh my God, that wasn't just revenge. That was political warfare from a High Lady.
And he's probably also like, oh shit, there can be a High Lady?
I think Lucien is so open to the idea. Like, he's very much like, yay, let's change things.
Girl power.
Even Eris stops dead in his tracks, fear shining in his eyes. Yeah, remember that backhand and gag he just did? You just did that to a High Lady. Bad, Eris. And one of the dumb butt brothers says, quote, "There's no such thing as a High Lady." If this sounds familiar, it should, because this is word for word what Tamlin said to Feyre early last book. Woof. Feyre's response is only, there is now. Chills. And I even love that Cassian is just staring at her in pride. Like, oh my God, I'm going to cry. It's so good. Later, when her and Rhys are debriefing verbally and physically, she refers back to this moment and Feyre asks him if it was okay that she declared herself or if she was even supposed to which Rhys is like, yeah, like I wanted to scream it from the rooftops from the second that it happened. But she worries that she did something out of line. She's still getting used to them being equal and not him being the High Lord, him being a step above. I do have one question though. If her magic was gone, how the fuck was she keeping the glamour on her arm?
I have absolutely been wondering that as well. Like it has kept me up at night before. And all I can say is Cauldron, boil me.
Cauldron, boil me. Feyre orders Cassian and Azriel to take her home and pairing off Cassian with Feyre, Lucien with Azriel. I love how like uncomfortable Lucien and Azriel look. I can just see this so perfectly. And it's even more delicious knowing where their stories go with Elaine. Like, please someone direct me to fan art of this. I need it. In Cassian's arms, Feyre flings her arms out around his neck, holding him tightly. And he responds with, I missed you too. I'm going to cry.
I love you so much, Cassian. Like, I love it so much. Such a sweet reunion.
They meet up with Mor in the middle, and we quickly learn that Rhys is on his way home as quickly as possible.
I love how that's Feyre's first question. She's so desperate and needs to see her mate again.
And when Mor says, all right, it's time to go home, Feyre's like, which one, Mor? Which one are you talking about? Knowing that Lucien has no clue about Valaris or any good stuff about the Night Court. Now, I'm not going to lie. It has always rubbed me the wrong way that Feyre does ask Mor here. Like, which one do we go to? She is a high lady. It's her call. The more I deep dive into it, the more I'm open to it. They are family, and rank is not something they're tapping into right now. She's also really, like I mentioned just a few minutes ago, she's learning how to rule over her friends. And even later, she will ask Rhys, how do you walk that line between ruling and being their family? And Feyre's very new to that, and she's exhibiting that here.
Yeah, I've always thought of it as Feyre respecting her friends' secrets. Valaris is all of theirs to protect. And even as High Lady, Feyre doesn't want to take that choice of secrecy away from them because of how sacred it is to them.
Mor, using her power of truth, apparently sees the good intentions in Lucien and decides to go to the townhouse.
I got really excited reading this because I feel like it is one of the very few times we truly see Mor use her power to discover if someone is being truthful. She did wield the Veritas Orb last book because its truth magic runs in her bloodline. But this right here is enlightening to her power. She can glean Lucien's true intentions and sense that he can be trustworthy, which, yes, is definitely different from mind reading.
So, to Valaris we go.
This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. As content creators, I can't tell you how easily and quickly imposter syndrome can sneak up on me, especially as we start doing these live events. Comparison is the thief of joy, but it can be hard to pull out of that downward spiral. Therapy can help you focus on what you want instead of what others are doing, so you can start embracing the life you're living.
Therapy has been invaluable in my life. As I have been not so quiet about on this podcast, I've been very open about my therapy journey. As someone who does tend to put very high standards on myself, and it can really weigh on me sometimes, like, whenever I'm trying to cut myself some slack and don't. Therapy has been instrumental to me realizing this pattern and learning to catch myself in it before I spiral out of control. I will scream the wonders of therapy from every single rooftop. Shouts to Taylor. I love you, girl.
If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's so easy to get started. BetterHelp is entirely online and gives you an opportunity to participate in therapy from your own home on your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Listen, we're all busy. It's not always feasible to go visit your therapist in person on a regular basis. BetterHelp makes showing up for yourself easy and accessible.
Get it off your chest with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/FFG today to get 10% off your first month. That is BetterHelp, HELP.com/FFG.
As heartwarming as it is for Feyre to be back in the foyer of the townhouse and back in Velaris, what really stands out to me upon this return is the first thing Lucien says as he takes in where they are. There are children laughing in the streets. And he says this with quiet surprise, as if he hasn't heard the sound in a long time. The Inner Circle may have brought him here to Velaris, but they are understandably very wary of his reaction. And what he says is a reminder of how unique Velaris is. And I love how children laughing is the first thing he comments on. Remember how rare and precious children are among the Fae, and how Amarantha targeted children in her destruction of Prythian, and how quiet it always is in the Spring Court. We did, however, see Alice's boys come out of hiding and feel safe to simply be children at the end of ACOWAR when they returned to the Spring Court. Children's presence symbolize safety and hope, and that is what Velaris is. When Feyre first arrived here, the sound of children laughing was one of the first things she noticed too, and I just love so much how this is the first thing Lucien comments on, because of course it would be.
But is that a tiny ancient one we hear? Emerging from her space where she was chilling in the living room is Amren. I'm guessing she stayed behind to protect Velaris, but we're not going to open up that can of worms again. Amren does a slight bow of her head to her high lady, quote, as much of a gesture of obedience as a 15,000-year-old creature would make. And then she turns to Lucien, who looks at Amren in horror. Later in this book, Lucien will tell Feyre, quote, Amren is the bedtime story they told us as younglings to make us behave. Amren was who would drink my blood and carry me to hell if I acted out of line. And yet here is Amren bowing her head to Feyre. Like, what a holy shit moment for Lucien. I love that he fully bows to Amren and she goes, already trained, I see. Like, Amren is loving this shit. And Cassian, of course, is like, oh, God. But the entrances are not done. Quote, the scent that hit me awoke me. My friends began smiling. Leaning against the archway, wings nowhere to be seen, is our boy Rhys. And Feyre drops to the floor, a small broken noise cracking out of her. And together, knee to knee, Rhys takes her hands from her face, brushing her tears away. And he murmurs, my love, and kisses her. Dead, swoon, deceased, episode is over, I'm done, I cannot top this.
It's so sweet. It's so sweet.
This reunion gets me every freaking time. Because first off, they're surrounded by their smiling family. And of course, Lucien, who is seeing a very different side of Rhys right now, but also because Feyre has not let herself think of this moment. She's only been on revenge, her one goal. She's been very tunnel vision, if we haven't said that enough. She is finally here, letting the weight of being separated from her mate for a whole month crash into her. She was unsure of when she would see them again, or if she would see them again. And here she is face to face with him.
Like Nicole said, she has been shouldering so much, separated from her loved ones, pretending to be someone she isn't, almost dying on multiple occasions. And yet she's had to keep pushing forward, compartmentalizing her love and vulnerability. And as soon as she feels safe, she crumples under the weight she's been bearing. I know I can relate to Feyre in this moment when life has been particularly hard and I've had to just suck it up and keep going. But then at the end of the day, maybe it's when I see my husband and I just like lose it. Yeah. Or mom would come into town while I was living in Portland and I was really struggling with being pregnant and caring for an infant. And I would just always become a broken down puddle when she came and hugged me because I could finally just be. Yeah. And that's exactly what Feyre is experiencing right here.
I think I had that moment with you one time in Chicago, or was it Chicago, or maybe it was in college? I can't remember, but I saw you and I just cried, like just straight up cried.
When it's just like a safe, you're finally in your safe space, and it's like, oh, like you can just like take the mask off, and you don't have to be strong anymore, and you can just be the vulnerable self that you've needed to be.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Rhys picks her up and tells the family to go on, get out of here. Basically, the metaphorical, I'm putting the sock on the door, so leave. And they listen, Lucien being grabbed by more before they all leave the foyer. And without looking back, these two lovebirds winnow upstairs.
But before we break out in the Bangity Bang song, Feyre offers to catch up. We get another Tamlin versus Rhys comparison here when she asks if he first wants to hear about the Spring Court. Remember how Tamlin made her do this immediately after returning from her week at the Night Court when all she wanted was to be in his arms. And of course, Rhys is like, no, I want to get naked with you first. Spy talk can wait. Except Rhys does give in and update her on what happened after she left the Spring Court.
Now, Rhys went to the Spring Court thinking that the bond was quiet, meaning that she was dead. So he went to the Spring Court in a panic.
And by the time he arrived, he realized that she had vanished instead of died. She caused quite the commotion with her escape, and Tamlin was raging through the forest hunting for her. Not even Rhys could track down her scent. But he did observe that Tamlin sentries abandoned him. Over half his people refused to appear for the tithe, which I'm assuming they found out later because when he was there, it was before the tithe.
Yeah.
Some are leaving for other courts, and others are plotting a rebellion, all because they love Feyre Cursebreaker and turned on Tamlin because he allowed Hybern to terrorize her into fleeing. Guess that sentry with the fake memory did reveal what he saw, air quotes there. Jurian has returned to Hybern, and Ianthe won't leave her temple. Gotta love that Rhys automatically knows it was his mate who did this to her, and he's just so proud. But then I suppose Rhys was like, okay, I know she's alive, but I don't know where she is, so I have to trust that she'll alert me, and then I'll be on alert to go and pick her up.
You make really good points, because on first read of this, I was like, so he goes to the Spring Court in a panic, thinking that she's dead, and then he just goes back to work a week, like, because he's then in the continent spying on the queens. But you make a good point. I think he's like, okay, I trust, because that was a big theme of last book, is him trusting her to know what to do. So I really like your way of thinking. And also we get a classic Rhys moment. We learned that he went to the continent to spy on the mortal queens, but he made a very specific point to go alone on this mission to their enemy compound. I love our self-sacrificing bat boy. My God. But man, is it just like stark on the page here. I will say, especially after the Hybern infiltration going so wrong last book, where people he loved were very much in danger, and then his mate literally sacrificed herself. I think he's like overcompensating a little bit in any way that he possibly can. But Feyre's like, I'm sorry, you did what now?
Feyre, of course, has to know where her sisters are. Rhys, being the loving, wonderful mate that he is, understands her deep concern and love for her sisters and offers to take her to them right now, even if that means he'll have to suffer blue balls. But knowing that they're at least safe, she isn't quite ready to see them. She wants to feel more stable before she faces that other challenge and that heartbreak head on.
But enough catching up. It's sexy time. Rhys is ready to turn up the heat and says, quote, I missed you every moment. Your laugh, your scent, the sounds you make when I'm inside you. Good Lord, sir. And Feyre begins to cry. And what does Rhys do for his bold, brilliant, brave mate? He licks her tears away, because of course. And then he tells her that maybe she should take a bath, which Feyre does, taking extra time scrubbing certain areas while Rhys white knuckles the door frame. Even as she towels off and brushes her hair, he makes no move to pounce. And I gotta hand it to these two because I gotta hand it to these two who are normally like ready to jump each other's bones. The build up to the sex scene is so delicious because we've been waiting, I don't know, like 100 pages for this to happen, a whole part of the book. And he's just like titillating her with like the trace of one finger along her body until she finally gives him the words that snap the restraint on himself. She says, quote, "You're mine." Side note, ever since I posted that one meme of like, it's like SJM couples in sex scenes, and it's all the seagulls from Finding Nemo, and they're like, mine. That is all I can think of now when I read "You're mine" scene in an SJM book. You're welcome. You're welcome. And Rhys's clothes vanish. Just vanish. I don't know why I find this so funny.
I found it really funny when I like had to like do a double take and I reread that too. And I was like, nope, they definitely did just vanish. Poof.
He's titillating her with his one finger and he's like being very deliberate. They're like really, the foreplay is strong in this one. And then he's like, okay, we're done. Boop, the clothes are gone. As he gets ready to slide onto home, his wings finally tear out from his back, allowing him to be his full self with his mate. Note his wings were not out earlier, and I'm assuming that's because Lucian was there and he had like a little bit of the High Lord's mask. But here, this is now full just Rhys and Feyre. This sex scene, while starting off playful and fun with the banter, the delicious banter, that titillating one finger, no more time for games. It is just pure authenticity and love between these two. This is them truly relishing in each other. There's a moment where Rhys joins, like clasps their hands together. And it's like every whisper of endearment to each other. They're repeating, you're mine, you're mine. And they agree that never again will they be separated. You can almost hear the foreshadowing for the ending deal of this book. But when they finish, Rhys says to Feyre, quote, oh my God, I love this so much. Quote, I missed you. Every second, every breath. Not just this, he said, shifting his hips for emphasis, but talking to you, laughing with you. I missed having you in my bed, but I missed having you as my friend even more. Puddle. I'm a fucking puddle. This relationship, this friendship, it is everything. Marry your best friend. I'm done.
Let's turn our full attention to foreshadowing important moments from this book and the rest of the series.
There is a moment at the top where Jurian winks at Feyre, quote, as if he too saw the game in motion. At this point, Jurian has already decided to trust Feyre, so this little wink is just like, we allies now, girl. Also, when in the cave, Lucian mentions that what will he do in the Night Court? And Feyre thinks about how she, as High Lady, could offer him a position, which she will, Night Court Emissary.
When in the Winter Court, Feyre thinks about how Amarantha butchered so many Winter Court children. This will be brought up later during the High Lord's meeting when Kalias this whole time thought it was Rhys who was responsible since they were killed by Daemati. Lucian politely corrects Feyre when she gives his family name Vansera. He has disassociated himself from his father and the Autumn Court for obvious reasons, but it further primes us for the unveiling that he is actually Helian's son.
Feyre asks if her sisters are well, and Rhys hesitates and then says they're safe. We will learn next episode how safe, yet very different states of unwell they are. It is time to sip some tea with the Suriel. Every episode, Lexi will walk us through a world-building topic to help us better understand this world and the people in it.
Today's Suriel topic is the Autumn Court and specifically the Vansera family. Let's start with the Autumn Court itself. It's located north of the Spring Court, south of the Winter Court, and to the west of the Summer Court. Its insignia is... fall leaves. Who would have guessed that? Inhabitants of the Autumn Court tend to have hair of varying shades of red, eyes of red, brown, green, or gold, and pale skin. Basically, they're a bunch of daywalkers for my South Park friends. Firebending magic seems to primarily come from the Autumn Court. There is a tradition in this territory called the Blood Duel. It's enacted only in very rare cases, and it's a battle to the death. It's specifically known for a male defending the mating bond. I wonder if that'll come into play later on. The Autumn Court citizens, and specifically its nobility, have a reputation for being cutthroat and highly competitive. It is, after all, known as a court of foxes. But hey, it's beautiful here and so colorful. Described as looking like a jewelry box with vivid colors of red, gold, brown, and green. Surrounding the forest of the Autumn Court are farmlands and fields inhabited by the lesser fairies who work the land. The High Lord is stingy though, paying them terribly, so they're desperate for any extra money or favors they can get. This territory has fertile valleys, streams with fish, foothills that back up to the northern snow-capped mountains. The Forest House is where the High Lord and his family live, located in the center of the territory. More on that shortly. Let's get into the Vansera family. Baron Vansera is High Lord of the Autumn Court. He is the oldest and cruelest High Lord of the seven. He is self-serving and just brutal to everyone, including his family. He is gifted with the power of fire. During the war 500 years ago, he fought on the side of humans, which still surprises me, not gonna lie. He is married to the Lady of the Autumn Court. She was part of a predominant family in the Autumn Court who wanted a political alliance within the court, so being a powerful firebender herself, she was married off to Baron Baron when she was 20 years old. But the year before this marriage, someone else had caught her eye at the Equinox Ball, Helion. 20 years later, when she had a few young children with Baron, Hybern attacked her estate and her two sisters sacrificed themselves to give her time to escape. She did, but was cornered by Hybern's beasts and then saved by Helion, which kicked off an on and off affair for decades. Baron eventually found out when she was pregnant with Helion's son. However, he could never prove that Lucian wasn't his, since Lucian also carried his mother's gift of fire and could pass as one of his sons, which led him to always hate Lucian. The Lady of the Autumn Court ended the affair with Helion, yet Baron has emotionally and physically abused her since, making her withdrawn and unresponsive nowadays, which is so sad because she used to be all brightness and smiles. The 7 sons, or 6 when you exclude Lucian, only see each other as competition, since it's the strongest of them who inherits the High Lordship, not the eldest. Technically. Eris is the eldest child of Baron and the Lady of the Autumn Court, born some years before the war. It is assumed he is the heir to the High Lord of the Autumn Court. It seems like this because he is the eldest, but we know from Tamlin that it's about strength of power instead of birth order. So we'll go with him being the strongest son as well as the oldest. He is the general of the Autumn Court's forces, and he secretly hates his father and is planning to overthrow the High Lord and take over the throne. We'll learn that his father has and continues to torture him too. No wonder he hates him. 500 years ago, Eris was betrothed to Mor, but he refused to marry her after she had been, quote, sullied by a bastard-born lesser fairy. In response, Mor's family left her naked with a note nailed to her womb that she was Eris's problem now. Eris, while out with his guards, found her but wouldn't touch her because, by law, that would mean she would be stuck in a life with him she did not want. So he left her in the woods, where she was later found by Azriel and taken to Valaris, hence the bad blood between Eris, Mor, Azriel, and Cassian. Eris is quite the interesting character because he does come off as a really bad guy, but we will learn that he isn't as evil as he's made out to be. For instance, he refused to participate in the torture and death of Lucian's lover, and then instead of hunting down his brother when he escaped, Eris alerted Tamlin so that Tamlin could help Lucian. He knows Lucian isn't Baron's son, so he knows that Lucian is not a threat to the High Lordship, and he has hinted that there is more to the story between him and Mor, like that he ended the engagement with her not because he was disgusted by her bangity-bang with Cassian, but because he knew she didn't want to marry him. Again, there's a lot of mystery around what really happened between him and Mor that I do hope we learn later on. When Eris becomes High Lord, he has a goal of changing the Autumn Court for the better. Then there are 3 other unnamed living sons who suck. They're Baron's cruel sons through and through. And then there were 2 more sons who were killed by Tamlin and Lucian when Lucian escaped to the Spring Court. And then, of course, we have Lucian, who, like I said, is actually not the son of Baron, but a love child of the Lady of the Autumn Court and Helion, High Lord of the Day Court. But Lucian doesn't know this. Being the youngest son with no desire for his father's title, Lucian spent his youth with the people of his court, being educated, training as a warrior, making friends with other High Lord's son, wandering the other courts. Which brings us to what happened to his lover and why Lucian had to escape. An unknown number of years ago, again, we're kind of estimating around a century, Lucian fell in love with a lesser fairy from the countryside, and her name was Jasmenda. But Baron deemed her unworthy of his son, so he had her tortured and executed in front of Lucian. His brothers, minus Eris, held him and forced him to watch. After this tragedy, Lucian abandoned his title and sought refuge among the people of the Autumn Court, but they believed he turned against them when he didn't save Jasmenda because she was one of the lesser fairies of the court. He escaped to the Spring Court, where 3 of his brothers followed him and tried to kill him, but Tamlin killed one, Lucian killed the other, and the third ran on back to the Autumn Court. All right, so now that we know about the Autumn Court in general and the family, let's wrap it up with the Forest House. The Forest House is the residence of the High Lord of the Autumn Court and his family, located in the center of the territory. It's a sprawling complex built in and around the trees and rocks with only its uppermost levels visible above ground. Below, it tunnels a few levels into the stone. It's so big that it would take half of the morning to walk from one end of the house to the other. Between the Forest House's position in the rock and how well it is guarded, no enemy approaches the High Lord's home without his knowledge, and none leave without his permission. Dun dun dun. And that, friends, is the Autumn Court.
Let us round out the ACOWAR only part of this episode with our favorite moments. I'll kick it off with Feyre repeating the names of those that she loves in the tent. She says Rhysand, Mor, Cassian, Amren, Azriel, Elaine, Nesta. Okay, Arya Stark.
I was going to say the exact same thing. Yes. When Feyre feels feels a cramp forming deep in her belly. All I can think is, oh dear, watery bowels. We've all been there.
Feyre's painter's palette descriptions are back in full swing, and it just makes me so happy, especially in the Autumn Court. One in particular, she is describing a jade stream, which in that stream, Lucian just snatches a fish out of the water, and I'm not gonna lie, why is that so hot?
Lucian says that his father will hunt Feyre for taking his power if he finds out, and she retorts, he can get in line. Feisty Feyre! I love it.
Again, taking his power. Again, it is taking his power. He fucking gave it to her.
Yep.
Come on, dude. Feyre tells Rhys that she's sure he could go crow her high ladyship from the rooftops if he wanted to. Crow is such an interesting word choice there, given what is on the cover of ACOWAR. It's a crow holding a ring, just so you know.
I thought it was a raven.
Crow, raven, craven. I see no craven, Edgar Allan Poe.
The description of Rhys's mind curling around Feyre's like their bodies are. Their minds are snuggling. It's so cute. Also, right before their sexy time, I love how she says that he is home. Not just Valaris, but Rhys is her home. Calling back to ACOWAR, where she said home was on the other end of the bond, which was Rhys.
Several moments from Feyre in the bath. I love that Rhys puts bubbles in this bath. When Feyre's surprised, he goes, do you have a moral objection to bubbles?
I gotta say, I love me some bubbles.
I love a bubble bath, dude. Feyre is
but I can't give my kids bubble baths because Mackenzie poops in the bathtub too often and the bubbles hide it. So I gotta make sure that she does not have bubbles. Fun fact.
Your daughter in 10 years is going to be like, Mom, you admitted what about me?
I know.
Also, Rhys, I just need to point out, Rhys is 10 out of 10 a bubble bath guy. All I can think of is Chandler from Friends when Monica draws him a bubble bath and he loses his mind about it. It's amazing. Also, in that bath, Feyre is lamenting that said bath is not big enough for two, which Rhys says, quote, a design flaw and one I shall remedy tomorrow. I wonder how big the bath in the river house is.
I love how the mountain cabin has one big enough for two, but not his townhouse.
I know. That's actually kind of surprising. We are about to begin our Maasverse Madness section for the day.
Today's Maasverse Madness includes spoilers for the Crescent City series. So if you have not read all 3 books, this is where we part ways. But before you go, reminder that next episode we will be covering ACOWAR chapters 15 through 21. And like we said at the top of the episode, if you're interested in more Fantasy Fangirls, please consider joining the Patreon party. It means everything to us as independent podcasters.
We also have a new summer merch line. We've got tank tops, we've got koozies, all things Fantasy Fangirls. You can find that in the link in the show notes.
And if you're not following us on Instagram and TikTok, come on, friends, what are you doing? Give us a follow at Fantasy Fangirls Pod.
And last but not least, before you leave us for the day, if you have not read Crescent City, please do not forget to rate and review the show. It is one of the best things that you can do for not only this podcast, but any podcast that you listen to, because it takes literally 2 seconds to hit that 5-star button. And if you choose to, write a little love note in the review section.
All right, friends, we are now entering our Maasverse Madness segment of the episode where we call out series crossover references and discuss theories. Today is spoilers for Crescent City. We can't bring up the Autumn Court in this episode without talking about the Autumn King from the Crescent City series. During Celine's mega download in House of Flame and Shadow, she explained how her mother wanted to open a portal from the ACOWAR world and conquer a new world to bring the Fae to new heights, new wealth, and prestige. But most people in her court refused because they just defeated the Daglin, aka the Asteri, and were like, we're good here, no more conquering. Except, quote, there were enough Fae throughout her lands, along with some of the fire wielders from the south who supported the idea. In one of the holograph visuals, Bryce sees red-haired Fae that look alarmingly like her father, the Autumn King, being greeted in Midgard by the Asteri. So from this, we understand the Autumn Court Fae, or at least some of them, traveled through realms with Thea from the Dusk Court to Midgard. So there is that obvious connection between the Autumn Court and the Autumn King's lineage. lineage. There are a lot of questions about who exactly the Autumn King is. Based on the timelines, I don't think it's possible for Baron to be the Autumn King, as some theorize. Bryce lives in a world 15,000 years in the future, so Baron being here alive right now, his ancestors, he would have had to travel there 15,000 years ago. So this, I really think it's more of just a subtle nod versus a crazy theory about the Autumn King being someone we know from this world. Just to continue a little bit further on that, there is a theory that Eris is the Autumn King. However, timelines aside, the fact that the Autumn King tortures Rune just like Baron has done to Eris, I like to think that Eris is a better person than turning into his father when he's trying not to be in this series. The Autumn King is also obsessed with planets in the universe as he searches for patterns to lead him to finding and traveling to their Fae homeworld, this world in ACOWAR. So I just found that very interesting there. And that's all I got there for Maasverse today.
I am curious how Bryce got the Starborn Fae powers.
I started going down that rabbit hole and I pulled out because that's a whole other topic. There is actually a theory, though, that she did get it from Ember. And Ember is a distant lineage from Thea because the Bone Carver says that there is mortals who have that Fae lineage there. So instead of it being the Archerons, like we've been assuming, it could actually be Ember in a different world.
Okay, I like it. But then how would Rune also have the Starborn Fae
He
powers?
would get it from his mother, who is on the Avalon side. We do know that he did get it from his mother,
yes,
because their father specifically is not Starborn. So he would have had to get that from his mother. So that's where the question is, where how did Bryce get it?
That's for a different day.
Well, friends, that's it. We're going to wrap up this episode here. Thank you so much for joining us on episode 2. Next, episode 3 of ACOWAR, we are covering chapters 15 through 21.
Thank you, as always, to our executive producer, Hayden, aka our sanity manager. We freaking love ya. Also, please share this episode with your fellow ACOWAR friends. We've had many people say that ACOWAR is their favorite book in the ACOTAR series. If you know someone who this is their favorite book in the ACOTAR series, hey, this is a great podcast to send their way.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much. We will see you next week. Bye-bye. Well, darn. Wrong book here. Okay.
Were you on ACOMAF?
No, I was on ACOTAR.
Do you have them all in one?
Which is both very helpful and not helpful at the same time.
Do we need any? Did that make any sense? Or did
I don't
we just
think
talk
so.
in a
I think we
circle?
just talked in a bunch of circles.
Cool. We'll cut that out of the episode.